Welcome to another episode of the Time Management Revolution podcast. I'm Helene Segura, and I am a time management fixer. And today we have with us a very esteemed guest, Dr. Alan Rozanski. He is a distinguished professor of medicine at the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai and director of nuclear cardiology at Mount Sinai St. Luke, combining his expertise in cardiology, health psychology, and behavioral medicine with the guidance of his comprehensive health model, the 6 domains of health. Dr. Rozanski has dedicated his career to helping clients understand how to maintain and enhance vitality in their daily lives. Welcome, Dr. Rozanski.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
What exactly are the 6 domains of health?
Sure. Well, I think we understand intuitively that health is more than the absence of disease. But once I point that out to people and I say, well, what is health? It becomes a bit of a showstopper. We really haven't thought it out, but I've thought about it for many years. So I say that the body testifies to what's healthy. Those things that promote longevity, protect the body's physiology, protect you from chronic disease, those are healthy, like exercise, for example. And things like smoking are unhealthy because they do the opposite. So when you look at that, you say objectively, physical factors, exercise, resistance training, a good diet, sleep, these all promote health. But so does our thinking patterns. For example, optimists live longer than pessimists. They have less heart disease. So that's the second domain of health, the quality of our thoughts. Third domain is the quality of our emotions. People are depressed, the body goes haywire, and they certainly have a loss of longevity. People are happy, it's the opposite again. The social domain is very profound. Even if you take social animals and isolate them, they start developing heart disease. And then the sense of purpose is one that's really quite overlooked. Our sense of purpose is a profound fact that people have a strong sense of purpose live longer. And the sixth domain is how you handle stress, which is ubiquitous in life. But when you handle it well, it promotes optimism, a good feeling, confidence, in all those factors. And the opposite, toxic stress, when it's overwhelming, for example, or associated with a lot of emotional reactivity, causes many chronic illnesses. So those are your 6 domains of health right there.
That just encapsulates everything that we need to not take for granted, because it is living a life intentionally and keeping all of those things in mind. And anybody who has listened to this podcast knows that I am a strong believer in finding out how we can improve our health, because you can only live your best life when you are actively pursuing a healthy life. So hopefully folks already get the connection to time management, but I'm going to ask you this question anyway. How does time management play a role in physical health?
Well, first of all, when you look at all these 6 factors together, the one thing they have in common is they all promote a sense of vitality, a sense of an inner sense of pleasure, in which we have a sense of wanting to do things because we have a built-in desire to live a life of purpose. So whenever our vitality is lagging, that's really a health indicator. We just don't think of it that way. But if you want to just start out taking, I think, perhaps the most obvious and in some ways the most important, you have to start with your physical health. When we are time stressed, what happens is that we make time for those things which are urgent and important. All the health behaviors, exercise, diet, they kind of live in what we'd call quadrant 2 in the old Stephen Covey or Eisenhower matrix. Those are the behaviors and goals that are important but not urgent. There's nothing calling you to exercise. So when you're under a lot of time stress, very often the first thing to go is my exercise routine. Well, I'll have, I just won't cook as well today, or cut down on sleep. These are the things that are so vital for health and the things that are often the first to go when we're not managing our time well.
So how does a poor time use lead to the stress and the inactivity? And really what got me is also, I've heard it can lead to preventable chronic disease. How does this happen?
Well, sure. So first of all of these factors are big risk factors for disease. I mean, we emphasize cholesterol and high blood pressure and so forth, but living a very sedentary life is a very profound risk factor for heart disease. So is lack of sleep, so is a poor diet. So those are the factors, the risk factors on the way to chronic disease. preventing them is the thing we want to do by making time for exercise, for sleep, and so forth. So what happens is when we have this agenda of many things to do, we're negotiating between priorities, right? And we're doing this in our head kind of subconsciously. So there is a universal human tendency that's always been there, and everybody has it, to overvalue those things which are in the present and to undervalue those things which are in the future. So what happens is it's a kind of a tomorrow trap. What happens is that you think about what I'm going to do today, and you look at your to-do list, your emails, and so forth. And if you feel a sense of urgency, the first things that are going to go are those things which just don't seem as important. So in other words, you could really value exercise, but today I won't get to it. I'll do it tomorrow. Tomorrow the same thing happens. That is the subtle and universal rationalization which underlies the procrastination in promoting your health.
So how can we move past that procrastination if we are intelligent and we understand how important exercise is, and yet we still find ourselves saying every day, I'll start tomorrow, I'll start tomorrow, I'll start tomorrow. How do we stop postponing and start building those healthy habits that are going to keep us alive in the future?
Well, the first thing is you got to be aware of the dynamic. We can fix things once we realize that they're going on. You know, if you have like an anger problem and you see its effects, it motivates you to work on it. Somehow time is so essential. We have developed what I'd say is a time-pressed mindset in our generation. It's that subtle feeling, I have so many things to do. And it's an actual mindset that we develop. And what happens is that it affects us. We start to prioritize. The more, think about a day where you're feeling very time pressed, right? So in those days, you're not at the top of your game. You don't feel as relaxed. You don't feel as creative. You don't feel as patient, right? So that's like a continuum from feeling quite relaxed, not time pressed, to feeling quite, time constricted. We live in a generation where I think we're all time pressed. We just don't see it. So the first thing you have to do is be aware of this dynamic, so because then you can begin to work on it. You can say, okay, now then what do you do? We don't change easily, and we don't change with big steps, I believe. I talk about the power of the first step. So let's say you want to exercise. You got to get on a playing field first. So instead of like aerobic success and what people talk about, I talk about psychological success. Can I, deliberately take 5 minutes out tomorrow to walk? Okay. And that doesn't sound like much. It's the hugest step. It's like when a rocket takes off, the greatest energy is that inertia to get off the ground. So once you get on the playing field, you can work on it. So you have to first see the dynamic, be aware that, you're dealing with this, and you probably are. And then look in the health domains and say, is there something I want to fix? And I think most people want to be healthier. And then a minimal first step I can get on that I can start to work with. And then, we can work from there. But that would be the first step.
Okay. So we could really, once we are aware of what is happening, we could just build in simple things during our day. So if we're going to the grocery store, instead of driving around looking for the closest spot to the main doors, we could park at the end of the parking lot and get a little bit of walking in. So just those little micro moments of having exercise. Now, you've been a cardiologist for at least a couple of years now, which is how you are so widely recognized. After decades of working with patients, what do you see results in a sedentary life? So I'm sure you see patients who have sedentary jobs and they're also sedentary outside of work. What kind of health issues do you see happening with them?
So when people are sedentary, you have at the beginning of a kind of inflammatory state. You have some increased insulin resistance. You have less what we call healthy endothelial function, the lining of your arteries. They start to become a bit dysfunctional. It may make you more prone to high blood pressure. So there are all these various things that can happen, even on the the level of the brain, we see that people are more creative. There's a big relationship between how much exercise you do and your future risk for dementia. So there's really, the exercise touches so much of the gene pool and is related to all of the chronic diseases. There's something like, sedentary death syndrome, in which they've related lack of exercise to all of the major chronic diseases.
Wow.
Even
How often?
cancer.
Oh, even cancer. Wow.
Even certain
How
cancers.
how often should we get up from our desks throughout the workday?
Well, if you got a sedentary job, it's very important to break it up, because the data shows that even, micro breaks, decreases a tendency to insulin resistance and so forth. Also, in terms of just, we haven't talked on this part of it, but the mental aspect of being physically active. In other words, you're sharper when you take breaks and so forth. So we don't honor relaxation enough in our generation. We don't honor breaks enough. So it's very good to break this up, at least for sure every 90 minutes, every 30 minutes would be better. Take some breaks and fit in a micro exercise or something, as a break.
Okay. And most of us probably will not make time for a 15-minute break every 30 minutes every hour. So if we can squeeze in at least a 2-minute break, 5-minute break once an hour, is that a good start?
See, I take all these suggestions and I put them in the singular, not in the plural. So like when you gave the example of going to the store and parking farther away and having that mindset all day long, we start once a day. You start to get out to that playing field. I can't emphasize that point enough in terms of being a clinician and having worked with patients for many years. I try to get people going, so think about if you don't do it once a day, but make it consistent, make it into a routine. And then it starts to build. You start to see the effects of it.
And you've mentioned sleep a couple of times already. We hear so many varying numbers about how much sleep we're supposed to get. Is it 6 hours? Is it 9 hours? So if you have a patient who is only getting 4 hours of sleep every single night, what would be your recommendation to them? Am I trying to get at least 5 hours? Am I trying to build up to 6? What's going to help me live that better life full of vitality?
Well, it's a great question. If you look at the data in terms of population data, the sweet spot seems to be around 7 to 8 hours. I know many people who are at 6 hours and doing just fine. But there's, first of all, more aspects to it. It's the quality of your sleep. It's whether you have regular sleep hours. It's also about circadian health, like, what time you're getting up in the morning. Are you getting some sunlight? There's many aspects to this. And there's one aspect here that I just wonder about, that maybe we don't have enough data, which is how much your need for sleep is also empowered by your sense of purpose in life. The sense of purpose is something when you feel focused and you feel accomplished and you have more energy and optimism. Do we need perhaps a little less sleep? I only mention that because I just know so many people in the health field who do get by with less sleep, and I see them being powerfully effective. But overall, it's important to get decent sleep. Usually sweet spot is about 7 hours per night. And a good tip is, how do you wake up in the morning? Do you feel refreshed? Do you feel energetic? You might, and I'm not talking about immediately when you get necessarily, but as you get up out of bed and start getting around your day, do you feel, that you have the energy for the day?
Nutrition wise, and I realize you're a cardiologist, but with your 6 domains of health, everything is interconnected. If I am sedentary, I know I need to get up, but when I'm sedentary, I'm also eating out of boxes and cans and wrappers at my desk. So what is one small change that I could make nutritionally that would help me take that first step forward on the path of eating better?
Yeah, well, it's another great question. So I apply the same logic, which is, let's say you have eat a lot of processed foods, bad snacks, things like that. Start by putting something positive in rather than denial. Say once a week, I'm going to make a very nutritious lunch the day before, cut up vegetables, put in, different nuts and things I like to eat, that I know that these things are nutritious, and I'm going to have that for lunch tomorrow, or dinner tomorrow, and put that in, and then start to build.
Okay, I really like that. Not because most people talk about the denial part where, oh, you need to give up soda. Oh, you need to give up this. But just instead, how about you add the one healthy thing? Oh, I love that. You see, this is why you're world famous. It's because you have these really simple tips that anybody can do, just that one little addition. Well, we've talked about people's health in general. Let's talk about you and some of your personal practices. You are a very accomplished man. What kind of time management strategies do you use in your professional life and your personal life to help you keep everything together?
Well, by full disclosure, I've been interested in all aspects of health and the mind-body relationship. I've been studying it for 40 plus years, but I've always struggled a bit in time management because I have the opposite of perhaps the ADD syndrome, where I can really get into something and concentrate for long periods of time. So the challenge for me has been living with life balance, which I think has to be very intentional. And you have to be clear on all your different life roles. I define life role as that area in life which, if you ignore it, eventually will slap you. If you're not paying your taxes, if you're not keeping a budget, if you're not spending time with your family, all these things eventually will sort of bite you. And then the thing is, you have to be intentional about it. You have to know what is the minimum amount I have to do in each of these areas, and to have that on your plate. And you have to review that periodically. And then on top of that, so I have worked on that over the years to be in life balance. It's been a struggle because it always means acknowledging that we can't do it all and feeling that limitation, which is a pain. But it's the greatest joy, because only when you're living in life balance do you really fully enjoy life. And that brings up to, if we have time, with other, one of the key time management principle, which is this whole 80-20 consciousness. Knowing your priorities and working on those primarily. So my to-do list simply, I use a computer program and I have my different areas, but I will then signal out about 5 things that I've established for the next day that I want to do, that are my top priorities, and I forget about everything else. Okay? And trust my brain that if I get those things done, it'll come to other things I want to do.
Oh, that is so fantastic. Oh my goodness. Well, we have covered quite a wide swath in a short amount of time, because really we could take each one of those domains and speak for hours on there. But before we say our farewells, is there anything else that you would like to share with folks about health or how to live life with more vitality?
Yeah, so the final thing I'd say is, you can take some of these things we've talked about, let's say exercise, and build them up into small snacks. You could say, maybe I can't get to the gym, maybe I can't do resistance training, which we haven't even talked about. It's very profound. But you can do wall push-ups, you can do heel lifts, you can do these different things during the day. You can, when you're brushing your teeth, you can be standing on one leg while you do it and actually build your balance. So these are creative ways in which we can take some of the health things we want to do and make it part of our life, what I call lifestyle exercise. So that's one tip that I would have for people.
Wow. Well, actually, we do have a couple of extra minutes. So can you talk a little more about this resistance training? Would that be the same as a body weight workout, or are
Yes,
those
it
two
would.
different
It
things?
would. It
Oh,
could
okay.
be with your body weight, it could be with bands, it can be with machines and so forth. But it is really the most overlooked part of physical health. I actually take that out away from exercise. I call them 2 separate domains. But it's really, doing the resistance work, which actually builds muscle care, the quality of your muscles. Your muscles combined, for your body, is the biggest organ in the body. It has endocrine effects that are healthy, in addition to actually building your strength. We see it, it's very easy to ignore it, but I'll tell you, as people get older, they're dealing with issues of balance, of fear of fall. 1 out of 4 Americans after the age of 65 has a fall per year. And this can be, markedly minified if you paid attention to building up, your muscles
Mhm.
over time. And then as people get older, there's like a fear of, chronic diseases. I say people should have more of a fear of frailty, of getting older and just outliving your muscles. So
Mm.
as we lose, we get at the age of 30, we're already beginning to lose about 3 to 8% of our muscle mass per decade. But we can minify that if we are, building in resistance training as we go along. So again, I say, make that part of your lifestyle. It's important to do.
Mhm. So you mentioned wall push-ups. What else could we do that's simple and we don't need to buy equipment?
Well, you can do planks, you can do squats,
Mhm.
you can do
Okay.
lunges. You can do bands for push-ups. I mean, there's abductor muscle, like thigh lift raises and so forth. There's many things you can do.
Okay. Well, I guess
The internet is very good for that. There's this, I will caution and say, if I add this one point, that it's really important with resistance training to get proper instruction from people.
Okay.
Because that same exercise, you can just a slight difference in how you do it may minify the value of doing it. So I think that's important to get instruction, even if you're looking
Right.
at.
Right. I've gone to a few YouTube channels, but I've looked for physical therapists or chiropractors, somebody in the medical field who is showing the movement so that way I am not injured. But something that I just learned recently, since I was traveling and didn't have little adjustable barbells with me, I found larger water bottles. And those became my little barbells that I could just have in my room. There you go. I can exercise.
Fantastic. I love it. That's
There
great.
we go. I got a pat on the back from Dr. Rozanski. Oh, yay. Well, doctor, if anybody else wants to find out more about you and the work that you're doing, how can they connect with you?
Sure, they can go to my website, alanrozanski.com, and they can also find me on LinkedIn.
Okay, wonderful. And for those who are not watching this, they are only listening, so it's audio only. I want to spell out your last name. It's Rozanski. It's Dr. Alan, Alan. Alan Rozanski, Dr. Alan Rozanski, thank you so much for being here today.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Doctor, you are wonderful.
Thank you. That went so fast.
I know. Your patients must love you.
Well, I've had an interesting time in medicine. I early on got involved in cardiac imaging, and by accident, virtually, I found out the relation between stress and heart disease. We were imaging patients in the laboratory. We would put them on a treadmill or a bike to look at the wall motion of the heart. And for reasons that related to certain observations, I decided to look at what happens to the heart during mental stress. So we developed a series of battery of tests. And the second patient we did was a 59-year-old man talking about he was about to lose his job. And as we're imaging the heart, and he's just talking about his stress, half of the heart stopped moving. And this was reproduced in about half of our patients. These are all people with heart disease, by the way. And it was when heart disease was more severe than today. And this has been reproduced in about 25 medical studies. So what happened was I couldn't walk away from that. And I began to, we published the paper. It actually made the New York Times at the time. And I started getting invited to these talks at different places. And I started hearing all this other research that people were doing. And it was mind blowing. And that's how I got involved in this whole field about 40 years ago.
Wow. Do you mind if I also share this little part of our conversation with
Really,
folks?
sure.
Because that
Absolutely.
is that is such a visual, a shocking visual to hear that
Yeah.
somebody's half their heart stopped just
Oh,
talking about their
yeah.
stress.
Yeah. This was in this one person. Usually it was a little less severe, but it
Mhm.
happened in these people. You have to emphasize these were just people who had significant heart disease, uh,
Right.
not in normal people. And thank
Okay.
God today, because earlier detection, cholesterol lowering medications, high blood pressure medication, we don't see the kind of severe heart disease that we did, 40 years ago.
Oh, that's good.
It was very good. Yes, yes, very good.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yes. Wow, I find that highly motivational. If I would just replay that snippet of the story that you told, I realized the people had heart disease. But if I replay that, that is a very clear and strong reminder. I need to eat well and I need to move well and I need to stay balanced.
We all do. We all do.
Yeah.